I think it's worth just taking a step back and acknowledging the fact that the past couple of years, I think we know that our world has just changed beyond all measure. And I think for many people, mentally, they're just catching up with a lot of that. And actually, I think some of the impact is kind of happening now for many people. And it's changed radically. And there have been so many existential crises that we're living through. And you kind of put that against the day-to-day work as well. And I think it adds up to unprecedented times that we're living through. And I think this thing of just trying to pretend everything is normal and carrying on is not the answer. And I know there's a fair amount of narrative about, oh, we need to get back to normal, but I don't think there is such a thing right now, and probably shouldn't be as well. And Melvin, I think you touched on this, some of the bigger things that have been going on. So, and I think it's important to recognise them and to name them, because this really affects kind of how we kind of lead our organisations, how we work with people as well, and giving them time and space to process this and talk about this is really important. So obviously the pandemic that we've been living through has just been enormous and affected so many people in lots of different ways, and continues to do so. And I can imagine that you see a lot of both physical and mental impact that has come through from this. Also thinking about, we forget that at the height of the pandemic, we also lived through the Black Lives Matter movement as well, and watershed moment globally, and really important that people stood up and said that enough was enough. But again, another huge thing that we've been living through. And then I mentioned this earlier as well. I put this slide together actually at one point in the summer of last year, when parts of the world literally on fire, parts of the world drying out due to drought, parts of the world underwater, and lives lost because of that. So I think, this doesn't help with feeling comfortable, feeling settled, and ignoring it is definitely not the answer. So I think in our organisations, there's a lot we need to be thinking about in terms of how we're acting on this. And then on top of this, Melvin, you mentioned this, then we're hit with the war, the absolutely appalling invasion of Ukraine, and the effect that has on people. And also, as we're seeing right in front of us at the moment, the cost of living crisis as well, the effect that has on not just colleagues, but the people that you work with day to day. So I don't say this necessarily to depress everybody, by the way, but I do think it is really important sometimes just to acknowledge that we are living in the most extraordinary times, challenging times, which I think is testing. And it's testing because there's more than one thing going on. So just taking a moment, I think, to talk about that. And going back to that point about, I don't think there is such a thing as getting back to normal. And it shouldn't be business as usual or work as usual, because the times aren't usual. And I think one of the things that I take from this, though, is the positive role that leaders can play to help guide the people that they work with. And these stats, they come from an organisation called Edelman, who are a big communications and brand agency. And they run something, if you've not heard of it, called the Trust Barometer every year. And the trends that we're seeing from this is that, not surprisingly, you know, people have lost faith, lost trust in governments, in politicians, but actually the people that they trust the most, or the organisations that they trust the most, are their employer. So on the one hand, that might seem daunting, but actually it creates a really good opportunity for us to be thinking about, you know, well, how do we build that trust with people? The other thing I think that stands out from this is that with that comes a responsibility as well. And I don't know if you've seen this in your organisations, no matter what your size, but actually people, beneficiaries, employees do want organisations to have a point of view, not on everything, but on a lot of the kind of social issues. So things like economic equality or inequality, which you probably deal with daily. Things like climate change, things like diversity and inclusion as well, things like the Black Lives Matter movement that I mentioned earlier. So there's an opportunity there for us to think about, you know, how we build that trust. So I'm going to talk through a few things that we can do to help with that. Don't have all the answers, and also it would be good to hear from you about what it is that you're doing. So against that kind of backdrop of uncertainty, I think the first thing to start with actually is not with that. Actually, it's to zoom in on the people that you work with and how are they and what's going on for them. And I think it was Sarah, you were saying this about your colleagues have just, and probably you, have been through an exceptional couple of years, a lot of people feeling, you know, really worn out. So actually taking that time just to pause for breath and actually investing in having those conversations with colleagues about how they are. I have a question here. Maybe if you can just put an answer in the chat. So when did you last just have time just to properly connect with colleagues? Was it this week? Was it a month ago? And when I say properly connect, I mean not talking about work. I mean talking about what's going on for them, for you. When did that last happen for you? And hello, Gita, by the way. Oh, you're from Autism Family Support in Oxfordshire. Oh, that's lovely that you're here. Thanks for joining. Oh, Hayley, you were lucky to have a 15-minute tea break virtually with colleagues this morning, and you do that fortnightly. That's really good. So it's like a conscious choice then, by the sounds of it, to do something which isn't the work. I can see some other people typing their answers, so we'll just wait. Sophie, you do have good chats in the office. Oh, and you're going for a staff dinner tonight. Well, that's fantastic. Great to hear, Sophie. Wonderful. I can see a couple of other people typing as well. Just wait for those to come through. So Hayley, while we okay, I'll come back to you in a minute. Hayley, Sarah, occasionally when you're in the office, perhaps every 2 weeks. Okay, really good. It's good that you're making time to do this. Okay, so 2 weeks before your holiday would have been sooner on our weekly online. Oh, that's nice. So you've got a catch up, it sounds like, Gita, that is over lunch and isn't about the work. I'll let everyone kind of carry on and keep reflecting. But I just wanted to share a few things that can really help with this zooming in. and making sure that we are really building that connection with colleagues. So I would say that in pretty much all interactions with people that you're working with, actually it's quite a British thing that we just kind of get straight down to the business in hand, and actually just taking, and it can take moments to actually just check in, give people the time and space to say how they are, and don't go immediately into the work. And I think also then making sure that you're making that space and time to genuinely get to know the people that you're working with and really understanding how they are is absolutely crucial. I also think it is really important to have what I'd call, it sounds horrible, but forcing mechanisms, which some of you have talked about. So I think rather than just relying on it happening, actually doing things like you were saying, Hayley, where you're making time in the diary just to talk and not talk about the work. And I think someone else was saying that they did that over lunch as well, is really important. But you can also do it in a bigger way as well. So one of the things that we've been doing in our workplace, and I think it's been really valuable as well, where people are working in a hybrid fashion, is getting people together out of the work setting and going out and volunteering. It doesn't have to be volunteering, it could just be going for a walk or a litter pick. It doesn't have to be a big organised thing, but doing something where you're taking everybody out of the normal environment and giving them again that time and space just to be and have different conversations, I think is really important. So Hayley, I'll just come back to you. So do you mind just saying a bit about was it your coffee catch-ups you were saying?
Yeah, it is something we do every fortnight, so it's in everyone's diary, but it is optional. Alison's raised a point in the chat about relationship type conversations, and obviously there are some colleagues of mine who are in back-to-back meetings and would find an additional meeting, just because you've got to, you don't have to, but because you put your camera on, because you're there, you're chatting, more draining than it is on the more wellness side. So the attendance, albeit we have a small organisation at the association, the attendance varies, and the onus is on attending if it's going to be better for you. Otherwise, taking those 15 minutes, and that's what we call it, it's called Take 15, taking those 15 minutes to do something else. If chatting if that's going to be your only 15-minute break from chatting, maybe do pop out into the garden if we're all working from home, if you've a garden and things like that. So yeah, it came about, and we've been doing it for maybe 6 or 7 months. And as I say, it's totally optional, but it's in everyone's diary as a reminder for taking the time, whether it's with colleagues to do that or by yourself in a different way.
Yeah, and I really like, Hayley, the fact that you're talking about it being optional as well, and people can choose how they want to interact with that. And I was really struck by your point, Alison, about that in the nature of the work that you're doing, that there are a lot of counsellors, and actually there can be too much. The pendulum is maybe swung the other way, and there's too much focus on this. So that's really interesting to hear. So I think giving people the time and space to do it in the way that works for them, I think it's really important as well. And interested, and I really appreciate your honesty, Melvin, that you say ashamed to say not in living memory, that it's a few months ago that this was able to happen. So maybe something to think about there. So really making sure that you're able to give people that time and space, build those connections, but also I think it's important not to brush under the carpet what is happening as well in the wider world, and we'll come on to what that looks like for your organisations as well. and giving people that time to process what's going on around them, giving that time to reflect and also talk about it and name it. I think it's really, really valuable, and it builds connection. And I say all this as well, and it's not just about being soft and fluffy. It's actually about, I think, then the work tends to happen faster because you enable people to do what they need to do, and then the work will tend to take care of itself. So if you're thinking, oh, well, we might not have time, actually, if you make the time, quite often it makes everything else go faster. So that was the first piece about kind of zooming in. And the next piece really relates to this. So thinking about your communications and how these are working with your colleagues, and do you rely just on, I know some of you work in kind of reasonably small organisations, is it all just relying on face-to-face or email? I don't know how many of you are working in a hybrid setup, but do you feel like they are set up for hybrid working? It would be interesting. Oh, hello, Andy. I think you've just joined. You might need to go on mute because it's giving a bit of an echo there. Oh, that's better. Thanks, Andy. So if you maybe could put in the chat how you feel like your communications are they where you want them to be, and particularly if you're working in a hybrid way, is that working for you? So just a few things that I thought would be useful to share on, particularly colleague communication, but also communication with wider stakeholders as well. So I think the first thing to think about with communication is that quite often people think about, oh, well, this is about doing kind of the formal communications and all of that. But actually, I think the starting point should always be about listening, what's going on for everybody in the workplace, what really matters to them, and making that something that happens all the time, and then tailoring what it is that you say in response accordingly. So I think really important that you're taking the time to listen to what's going on for people. The other thing that I wanted to share is, again, this is that point about, you know, quite often we just jump straight into the work, particularly when there's so much going on, everybody's stretched, not enough time. Actually, the starting point, and again, it does not have to take long, but is taking that time to make sure that you step back with the people that you work with and actually celebrate what it is that you've achieved. And it's something I certainly have to remind myself to do, because I'm like all about let's make progress, let's make stuff happen. But actually taking the time to do this is absolutely critical. And then the next thing I really want to focus on, and I was really struck by some of the comments at the beginning about what was on your mind, is that many of the organisations that you're working for, there is the kind of backdrop of macro and uncertainty in the world, but also probably in your organisations as well, and thinking about kind of how your organisations are operating, the sustainability of them, funding and all of that. And I think it's a really difficult challenge, but I think in the face of that, quite often what we try to do as humans is try to reassure people that things are okay, when actually people don't necessarily want that. They actually want as much as possible the truth. And I think this thing of where you can provide certainty to people, even if that is something they might not want to hear, I still think that's the important thing to do. I think the other thing that we can do in organisations is try to wait till everything is perfect or something is resolved, and then we'll tell people about it. and there is a time and a place for that, but actually most people aren't stupid, and they want to know the big picture. They want to know what's going on, and they will then feel actually a little bit more in control of it as well, even if the big picture is not necessarily always pretty. But I think actually trusting people with that as much as you can, and then making sure that they're kept updated, is absolutely crucial. So, and I'll come on to some very wise advice from somebody about this in a second. I'm just going to pause because I see we've had a few things come in the chat. Hayley, have you been able to have a, because I'm not reading and talking at the same time. Messel Meg has put something in here.
Yeah, so what Meg's talking about, if I've read your comment correctly, Meg, is around it feeling a bit more intrusive, having to email or text colleagues, presumably where they, well, for Meg's situation, she works mostly alone as the kind of one of two colleagues in an organisation. Feels more intrusive having to kind of make a formal communication with someone rather than just kind of a swivel of your chair and a tap on the shoulder in if you were sharing a working space, which I think is a really interesting and very correct point. And I wonder if that's about like letting go ourselves of those anxieties of starting those kind of conversations and thinking, well, I need it to get my job done, and my colleague would probably want me to do that. But it's a really interesting point, unique point as well, I think, Meg.
Well, 100%, Meg. And I think number one, isn't that's fantastic that you're actually kind of considering the impact on the other person, but also exactly what Hayley said, you know, you're there to do the job, and sometimes that job is, you might need stuff from other people. So, but I think it is okay to you know, they can put boundaries around that, but you can also be clear with them about when you need a reply by, or it might be that if the colleagues that you're working with, you can just put in regular kind of catch-up slots with them, and if they're not needed, then you can cancel them. So there are probably like little things that you could do, or even have the conversation with them if you haven't, about how do they want to be communicated with, or if you're using similar technologies like Teams or something, could you have an understanding about how you might message somebody and check in with them first if they're available to be interrupted. So lots of things that you could do there. But I think also if you've got those 2 days, then you want to make the most of them, don't you? You shouldn't apologise for wanting to do your job. And if they don't want to engage, well, that's their choice. So yeah, thanks, Meg, for sharing that. The other thing that I wanted to ask about as well is how many people are doing hybrid working in their organisations, where it's a mix of home, office, or different workplaces. Maybe just use a virtual hand if you can, if you are doing. Yeah, Alison, you are. See a few people. Yeah, Meg is. Sarah, yeah, so quite a few of you hybrid working. Maybe you could also put in on a scale of 0 to 10 how well it's working, where 0 isn't really not working and 10 is working well. I'm interested to know. While, oh great, 8, 6, 9, fantastic. 8, fantastic. Really good that it's working well, and I would imagine it's working well because probably you're building those strong relationships. But just a couple of things that we have learned over the past couple of years in our own organisation is that when it comes to hybrid working, I think being clear with people about what is expected is important. So it may be that you don't have expectations that certain people have to be in the workplace or at home on certain days or certain times. But if that's the expectation, that there is no expectation, making that crystal clear, I think, is helpful. If there is an expectation, that people come together and are in on certain days, then I think, again, making that clear is absolutely critical. And then on the thing about making the time to connect, so this goes back to the points we were talking about at the beginning, which is that if you are in that hybrid working environment, and it goes back to your point as well, Meg, about kind of wanting to connect with colleagues, I do think it is crucial to have those points in the week or the month where you are coming together, and coming together as human beings, not just coming together as co-workers. So you're able to kind of talk about what's on your mind, what matters to you, just what's going on in life for you. And because exactly what you said, Meg, those opportunities just to read someone's body language because you're in the same space, fewer and fewer, just to kind of, you know, tap someone on the shoulder and have a quick conversation, they're not there in the same way. So I think, again, thinking about if you are using that setup, making sure you are building that in. Oh, Alison, isn't it more unusual not to do hybrid working? I suppose it depends on the organisation and what's happening for them, doesn't it? So it depends on the situation. But I can imagine in the sector you're working in, then yes, it's probably more unusual not to. Thanks for asking. I wanted to just share something. I put this in very last minute into the session today. I literally saw it an hour or so ago. I don't know how many of you know the organisation Timpson. So they are the shoe repairers, key cutters on the high street, and their CEO, who's the son of John Timpson, who set it up, James Timpson, put this thing out about how he leads, handwritten, as you can see. And I just thought it spoke to so many things that we were going to cover today. And so I just thought, oh, I'll just share it, but full credit to, this is not mine, this is James Timpson's. And I don't know if you know about Timpson as well. They have a fantastic way of working with local communities, and particularly they employ a lot of people who have had challenges, maybe been in prison, give people a leg up, but also do this thing of putting trust in the people that they work with as well, which really shines through here. But he also talks about how he leads from a point of view of not just trust, but also kindness and caring. So no surprises that the first thing that he talks about is the little things that really matter to people. And this is, you know, goes back to that point about take the time to build those relationships, understand what's going on for people. I really love the second point about, you know, operate at the top and at the shop floor. I mean, it depends on the kind of size and nature of your organisation, but I think the point is, you know, really let people have their wings to do their jobs, but also at the same time have incredibly high standards. And that goes back to that point about just being really clear about what the expectation is. And then this next point about being fast, and again providing clarity. So, you know, people are asking questions, answer yes or no, but actually saying I don't know is okay as well. Love the thing he says about most meetings are a waste of time, so it might be worth thinking about how many of your meetings are a waste of time. And then his point about kindness, and also recognizing and trusting that your colleagues are actually better at most things than you are. So I just thought that was a lovely thing to share, and definitely spoke to me, so wanted to share that. So we've talked about zooming in, we talked about kind of communications, particularly with our colleagues, but then I think given what's going on in the times that we're living in, it's also important to zoom out, but to do that in a focused way, and thinking about the role that your organisation plays in the wider world, and thinking about who and where you need to engage with, because not all things are created equal. And I don't know if everyone can just put in the chat, over the past couple of years, what things have you in the wider world needed to engage with? So, you know, I'm thinking about things like the Black Lives Matter movement, and a lot of organisations were, you know, very slow to actually have a point of view on that. I'm thinking about the war in the Ukraine as well, and you know, again, a lot of organisations were very slow to have a point of view on that and stand up and be counted. Thinking about Roe versus Wade as well in the US at the moment. So these issues, well, some of them will matter to everybody, but I think, you know, thinking about actually what matters most to your organisation, but also at the same time being really clear about where you want to focus. So you don't need to engage with everybody in everything. And you know, we live in a world now where there's a, it seems like an awareness day or an awareness week for everything. And the temptation is to think about, oh, well, I need to be kind of in every conversation. Actually, you probably don't. And thinking about making it count when you are going to have those conversations, if you are going to be engaging with people, whether it's on social media, events, whatever it is that you're doing. But I think being really clear about where you want to engage is crucial. Oh, Sarah, climate anxiety, especially for young people. Absolutely, it's a topic very close to my heart. Sarah, I don't know, are you able to come off mute and just say a little bit about that and what that means for your organisation?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're seeing a sort of increase in particularly for young people, not just young people, but I think for younger generations and their families, we're seeing it more and more in our work. We specialise in mental health, and it's coming through as a particular sort of strand of you know, anxiety and stress and worry for our young people. And it's something we probably, to be fair, you know, 2 to 3 years ago, we wouldn't have necessarily sort of considered as a strand of delivery and of a real need that our organisation could and should be sort of supporting. So it's been worked into our next 5-year business plan to really sort of skill ourselves up as well, in terms of how we work with our local communities to look at a global crisis, but on a local level. So it's definitely an emerging priority for us, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, there's a point about, you know, that is something you need to be focused on. And if something happens in the world that relates to that, actually you might want to have something to say about it, or have a response to it, or even create a space for people to talk about it, but making those considered choices as well. I was thinking back as well to last week being Mental Health Awareness Week. Maybe give me a thumbs up if you didn't find it a burden virtually or in the chat. So it sounds like then that maybe a lot of you felt like it was a bit of a burden. So I think there is a thing about you know, thinking about how, if you are going to have something to say on those things, how are you going to manage that in a way that is actually helpful for your organisation, helpful for you as well. And there may be some things that you step away from, or you think, actually, I'm going to, you know, keep it light. Meg, you're saying you're trying to be aware of current issues, e.g. Ukraine, Roe versus Wade, so that your volunteers can make informed decisions about whether they're in a healthy headspace to take on shifts in case it's something that hits very close to home. Absolutely. And you often get more calls about specific topics at times when they're yeah, thank you for sharing that, Megan. I think that's really important, so being mindful about what's going on from them. Alison, your clients and volunteers get really angry, and rightly so, absolutely, and you do lots of campaigning. Fantastic. So I think, you know, we none of us live in a vacuum, but I think in this busy world with so much stuff coming at us and so much uncertainty, actually creating that certainty to some degree for your organisation about what are the things that you want to maybe campaign on, have a voice on, talk about, but also what are the things you maybe aren't going to get involved in, and maybe step away from. And making those conscious choices is really important, because otherwise you just will kind of end up wearing yourself in. And I think the other thing on this as well is having your eyes and ears open, antenna up to what's going on around you, and making sure that if you do need to respond, particularly if you say, Alison, you've got clients and volunteers who are tuned into this stuff, it's important that you're listening to that and responding where you feel like you need to respond. So we're going to zoom right back in again and actually think about, are you set up to do all of this? Because it's a lot. And if any of you attended the wellbeing session that Hayley mentioned, and happy to do more of those if any of you want them. But all of this starts with us, and we actually can't really do any of this, or we can't do it to our best abilities if we're not set up to be at our best. So if anybody's brave enough, maybe you could just put in the chat, when did you last do something for your well-being? Or even when did you last deny yourself something for your well-being? Because quite often we'll do that to ourselves, we'll sabotage ourselves. So if anybody is happy to share that. And we do that, and thank you, Hayley, for putting in the chat that we recorded that session. So really obviously happy to share that again, but just a few things from that. So first of all, you know, our energy levels, our focus will naturally fluctuate through the day, the week, the month, depending on what's going on. But I think making sure that you exercise the muscle of actually checking in with yourself and how you're getting on, how are you really, but also doing this with the team that you work with is really important. Because if we don't, we can just, you know, things can collapse around us and then it's too late. So really thinking about how you are, and, you know, if some of your warning signs are coming up, thinking about that as an opportunity to do something to take care of yourself. And great to see, Sarah, that you took off last Friday afternoon as a reward for submitting a huge funding bid. Fantastic. And Melvin, you went to the gym this morning. Not that you like it, but it gives me some me time. Melvin, do you feel better after you've done it?
Physically, no.
Mentally?
Yeah, I do.
You do feel better. And this is the rule of thumb sometimes for the things you know, that we do in life. Do they make you feel better? You may not want to do them, but if you feel good for doing them afterwards. I had the same thing last night. Have love-hate relationship with doing yoga. Didn't really want to do it, made myself do it, felt a lot better for doing it. It was really worthwhile. So thinking about, you know, that internal narrative we have with ourselves about our own well-being. And this comes to the second point, which it is crucial to give yourself that permission to do what you need to do, because where does permission come from to do the stuff that keeps us on track, keeps us healthy mentally and physically? Might come from your partner, might come from your family, might come from your colleagues, but ultimately we need to be the first person giving ourselves permission to say, actually, like Sarah, I've done a massive piece of work. It's been, you know, probably you've been working full on. I'm going to give myself a break. That permission probably, did it come from you, Sarah? Did you give yourself permission to do that, or did someone else tell you to do this?
I did give myself permission, though I did feel like I had to check in with my chair for him to endorse that permission. And then I did feel a bit guilty about it. But, you know, I did do it.
Oh, and did your chair say, well, why are you even asking me? Go and do it.
Yeah, to be fair, he did. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Alison, I love your point about you don't think of work as the place for well-being. Interesting. Can you tell me about that either on the chat or you find it annoying when your manager keeps asking, but it is your business. 100% it's your business. And, you know, you should only share what you feel comfortable sharing. The one thing I would say is that, you know, we can't do our best work if we don't feel at our best. But, you know, you should only share with people what you feel happy to share. Thank you for sharing that here, though, Alison. And then the last thing on here that I wanted to share is a really practical thing. Is quite often, you know, we can kind of take on a bit of a mentality that we're at the mercy of our diary and we're not in charge of our time, and sometimes we're not. But there are kind of points when we can be ruthless about our time and using your diary as a tool to help you rather than to hinder you. I had a conversation, a meeting with a guy, I think it was last Friday, and he was late to the meeting. It was just an online meeting. Really senior guy in our organisation, and he said to me, oh yes, I'm in back-to-back meetings and the last one overran, and then I've got meetings all the rest of today, blah, blah, blah. And I felt for him, but I also felt like saying, well, you need to sort that out and get in your diary. You're in charge of it. It's your diary. It's your time. You know, you can put some boundaries around that. So I think getting into this habit of actually making sure that you're being ruthless in a nice way with your own time, and making sure that you're building in space to do like focus work. So if you are writing a bid, you know, rather than hoping it will happen when you've got a day full of meetings and then it ends up happening at night, actually block in the time to do that and let people know that that's what you need to do, and they will generally respect that. Making sure that you're maybe blocking out time to do the things that make you feel good as well during the day. So even if that's, you know, a half an hour lunch, maybe 20-minute walk, something that is going to kind of put energy back in the tank. And also thinking about looking at your diary for the week as well. And a colleague of mine always used to talk about her balance of radiators and drains during the week. And if she had too many things in her diary that would drain her energy, then she would rebalance it to make sure that it was balanced. So it has just been so lovely to hear from you and to get your thoughts and reflections as well. And I'm just going to stop sharing the slides, and I'm just conscious we're nearly at nearly at the hour. I'm just checking the chat as well. So Meg, you've said something. You really miss when you'd have travel time for meetings built into your diary, for going to meet people in person. That's and also some people say, you know, if they are doing working from home as well, that even though they appreciate that, sometimes they miss the commuting time as well as kind of like punctuation points during the day where they could have some time to themselves or time to do something else. So again, it is that thing of looking at diary. Where can you build that in? If you know you need that, then thinking about, you know, giving yourself permission to do that. Alison, you said it's not really your responsibility to look after your staff well-being. Yeah, it is absolutely their responsibility. You know, we're all responsible at the end of the day for taking care of ourselves, and everybody is a grown-up. I think creating the right environment, though, where people know they have permission to do what they need to do to take care of themselves is absolutely critical. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, wonderful. Has anyone got any final questions, thoughts, reflections before we wrap up today's session, which I hope has given you a bit of food for thought? I've got the sun coming right in at me. I can see a couple of people typing.
Please do come off mute.
Yeah.
between the chat box and the participant panel and things, if you'd rather ask your question to Anna, please do. But I can see people are still typing as well. So I'll only take a second to say thank you, just in anticipation of us continuing. If people are writing in questions, please, as I say, write or raise a hand and unmute yourself if you can.
Now in the chat as well. So if you want to contact me another time, that's fine. I think you've got that.
Lovely. Well, I think people are writing their thanks mostly, which is nice, of course.
Oh, thanks, guys.
We'll see what Sarah's typing. But should it not be a question, it's thank you. Great stuff. In which case, I will just sort of briefly wrap up. We've alluded and actually when Anna mentioned radiators and drains, that came right back to me from the session that she did deliver on wellbeing last year for us. So I will look, as I said, we'll look and see where, if we recorded that and where we put it, it'll be on our members area. I'll signpost that to you. And I know there were some resources around the energy action plan, which I mentioned at the beginning of my call and this call, and some of my colleagues have said hello and mentioned that they've joined the association this year, so missed that themselves. We actually brought it back around. It's so much of it's about making the time. Like Anna said, it's easy to think you don't have it. It's easy to not have it. But sometimes 15 minutes really pays dividends, even as soon as the next day. So I hope that's the case for spending the hour with us at the very least. And Angela, that's a lovely comment to say, thought-provoking and a good reminder of the importance of self-care, definitely as a leader. So hopefully people have a bit of a buffer, almost a travel time buffer after this meeting to sit with what's been discussed. I will get out to you the recording and bits and pieces and anything else, but I'd just like to extend, I guess, a thank you on behalf of everyone in the chat and everyone that's attended and the association to Anna for presenting today. Really fantastic and much appreciated. Great. Thank you, everyone. We'll speak soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.